ahead and we will just get started as we have one more panelist who's going to be joining us in a little bit, having a little technical difficulties, but I guess that is the rhythm of being virtual. Things happen, but we're going to make it work so then we can have a great group discussion, a great first time fireside chat. By the way, I'm Kevin Obamanu, one of the customer success managers here at Unibuddy. So glad you all are here. This is our first Unibuddy fireside chat. I am not by a fireside, but that's okay. Maybe you are somewhere, which is great. So we're excited to put this session together and even more excited to be joined by an amazing panel of legal and higher ed professionals. Today, we'll be discussing that messy elephant in the room. Yes, you all know what it is, the recent immigration policies regarding our international students. As we all know, international students are invaluable to the American higher education system. They're a core pillar of diversity and inclusion, and they definitely deserve and need the support so they can succeed. And we're hoping that we're able to provide different ideas and different guidance so then you all can do that, especially this fall. Our panelists today will introduce themselves, and I'll give each of you about 15 seconds or less to kind of say your name and role. And we're going to start off with my girl, Alicia. Hello, Alicia.
Hi, how are you? Hi, everyone. My name is Alicia Kinsman. I am an attorney. I have an immigration law practice here. It's a solo practice here in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Where I also do some work for a local nonprofit also in the area of immigration law. I'm really happy to be here.
Thank you. And next, I'm looking at the row that I see on my screen. So next on the row is Landon. Landon, please introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. My name is Landon and I work in international student recruitment at the University of Kentucky.
Thank you. Kelsey.
Hi everyone, I'm Kelsey Howard. I'm the Assistant Director for International Admission at DePaul University in Chicago.
And last but not least, Miss Rachel, hello.
Hi everyone, my name is Rachel and I work with Landon in International Student Recruitment at University of Kentucky.
Thank you all so much for being here. We're really excited for all the information you're going to share. And before we get into the discussion, there are a few housekeeping things so that I want you all to know. If you have any questions that come up during the discussion, please go ahead and put them in the Q&A. We're going to have a discussion for about a half hour or so, and then the rest of the time we'll go ahead through all the questions. So you should see the Q&A section of the session and be able to put your questions there. Also, you all in the audience will remain muted except for the panelists to keep the conversation manageable and interactive. If you do have any technical difficulties at all, please reach out via the chat or email my amazing colleague, Maria Velasquez at maria.velasquez@unibuddy.com, and we'll do our best to fix any issues. And finally, we hope you enjoyed this chat. It will be recorded and shared with everyone, and do give us any feedback that you may have to make these future fireside chats even better. So let's go into this right now. So I guess I'm gonna ask this to all of you. And the ruling that came a few weeks ago, which finally was rescinded, created a lot of panic across our community in many different ways. And I'm pretty sure there's still some confusion out there. How have your teams been able to navigate through this? And for those of you in the universities, how are your students now and what kind of information have you all been giving? And any of you can go ahead and start answering that question.
I could speak on behalf of myself and colleagues and also all of my clients, which is that it's sort of like whiplash, right? I mean, we're seeing it from all sides. The changes and proposed rules that have come out that are quickly trying to be put through, and you know, laws trying to be changed via tweet and things like that have made it really difficult, really stressful, especially for individuals who are already trying to navigate complex systems, who may be dealing with issues related to the pandemic, family issues, and all the other obstacles and barriers folks face when they're relative newcomers here to the US.
Anyone else?
Well, so I think from the university side, what many of us, I know from talking to colleagues at other institutions, are doing is just trying to pivot whenever we need to and trying to remain as flexible as possible, which if you work in higher education know that it is not necessarily our forte to be flexible. I mean, in the international sector, I think we are a little bit more used to that than maybe university wide, but obviously like a guidance coming out saying that students have to have in-person instruction, it really involves the whole university community, the provost office, the planning for the academic calendar and the schedule, all of the faculty. It's not just the international office or the international admission team who's dealing with these changes. So it's just been a lot of like manic trying to keep up, really like all hands on deck, constantly attached to your phone, waiting for news kind of environment for the last couple of weeks. We're at DePaul planning, we were already planning to have some in-person instruction, some hybrid model instruction, some fully online instruction, just a mixed bag, a little bit of everything. So that was, I think, a positive for us, I guess, in the face of the new guidance, but obviously like we didn't plan on all of our F1 students telling them that they had to have some of that in-person instruction. So that was something that was a concern for a time. And now in the face of the rescission, is that even a word? Them rescinding the order, the guidance. Then obviously we don't necessarily have to worry about that for continuing students, but for new students, it's still a concern. I'm sure all of you on the university side are still trying to be like, are we going to get any new students? Like, how are they ever going to physically get here if they are trying to get here and take in-person classes? So for those students, we've given them all a letter that they can use to accompany them to the US along with their I-20 and their F1 visa if they're ever granted it. So that I think is something that's highly advisable that I've seen not just DePaul, but a lot of peer institutions doing. Other than that, just like getting Instagram posts from students coming into the border and having difficult interactions with CBP agents. I could go on for a long time. I'm going to stop there though, because I'm sure that some of the rest of you have something to add. So,
and I'm pretty sure Rachel or Landon, you've also seen some of these posts that have been on social media with your international students who are incoming and also those who are returning, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And well, yeah, so I would just, to the first question, I would second everything that Kelsey said. I mean, flexibility is key right now because every student has a different situation depending on where they're coming from. Are they a freshman? Are they a transfer student? Because, some of the transfer students are currently in the United States, so it's a little different story. But of course, even, within the last 2 months and even really within the last month, everything about in-person classes has been up in the air. And at the University of Kentucky, we do plan on having in-person classes and we are going to offer a hybrid model. But we quickly had to come up with a 100% online offering as well for our international students that are having visa issues. And then comes in all the trouble of, can we offer this fully online program to students in all of these different countries with tax implications and so on and so forth. And so that's been a whole nother challenge in and of itself. But yeah, I think flexibility has really been key in working with individual students on a case-by-case basis as much as possible to help them navigate the situation, as we ourselves are also trying to figure out the best way to navigate the situation. And, Rachel, maybe you want to elaborate a little bit more about what we're doing on campus to accommodate the students who do still plan on arriving?
Yeah, I would just say that we really kind of have thought of this, as Landon said, as a two-pronged, well, many-pronged, I'm certain, but two-pronged in the largest sense issue of the students who are not yet in the United States. How do we support them? And then the students who either are already in the US or who will manage to come over for the first time, how do we keep them safe while they're on campus? And I think that a lot of our role as being the recruitment team is to really helping all of our prospective students navigate all of the resources that are available to them. Like Landon mentioned, our totally online Global Wildcats program for students who can't arrive, but then really connecting all of our students with the whole team of people we have to help in international admissions, in our international student and scholar services, and our visa and immigration specialists. So a lot of it is to really be this as effectively as possible to really work as a clearinghouse for anywhere else on campus that our students might need to get in contact with.
And I actually have a question for Alicia regarding all these things related to the visa. So first, for those who are joining us that may not be working with international students but want to relate some of this information to their colleagues that are, can you describe what is, because we have a lot of acronyms in international recruitment. So can you explain what is SEVP, SEVIS, ICE, USCIS for people who don't know? And then also, can you explain some of the common visa types for international students as well?
Definitely. We like using acronyms in immigration as in various other contexts. So sure, so SEVP stands for the Student and Exchange Visitor Program, which is part of DHS, right? It's a section of DHS, Department of Homeland Security, the large kind of mothership agency that oversees many aspects of Homeland Security, including most of our immigration processes. And so SEVP, as part of DHS, oversees and provides guidance to any schools that are authorized to host foreign students and or exchange individuals here on cultural exchange visas. So in particular, those schools that have F and M non-immigrant students in their schools. They also are the body that oversees and administers SEVIS, SEVIS, which I never remember the actual words in the acronym. I probably should have typed them out so that I would have. The Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, I think, which is our data system. It's a web-based data system that is administered by SEVP, which tracks and records all sorts of information and data about all of the non-immigrant students and exchange visitors that are currently here in the US. It requires inputting and interaction from both the educational institution and the non-immigrants themselves. And it prescribes specific ways that both have to interact in order to maintain legal status here in the US for the non-immigrant. ICE, ICE stands for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, which is an enforcement arm for immigration. They are primarily tasked with enforcing immigration laws in the interior of the US. So that would be apprehension, detention, and removal for individuals who are subject to removal from the US. They have several subdivisions, but we usually just generally refer to them as ICE. And then USCIS stands for US Citizenship and Immigration Services. USCIS, like ICE, like SEVP, part of DHS, but USCIS is the agency that adjudicates applications and petitions for benefits and relief under our Immigration and Nationality Act. That means when you're submitting an application for an employment authorization or to get your green card or something similar, you're submitting it to US, or an extension of status, you're submitting it to USCIS. They make the decisions. You also wanted me to talk about non-immigrant statuses, right? So the most common are, the most commonly used non-immigrant statuses for individuals coming to the US to pursue studies would be F, J, and M. They are all common types of non-immigrant visas. Non-immigrant means that the individuals who successfully obtained those visas demonstrated to the satisfaction of the adjudicator on their case that they do not have an intent to remain here permanently. It is temporary in nature. F1s can be granted to foreign students who are looking to pursue a full course of academic study here in the US at a school that, of course, is approved through SEVP and monitored through CVIS. An M1, very similar, except for their full course of study would be taking place at a vocational or technical school. And then J1s are individuals who are coming to the US as part of a cultural exchange program, which typically involves work and study as an exchange visitor program. F, M, and J visas can also, in some cases, have derivatives, so a family member who accompanies them, but that's the overview.
Thank you so much, and that's really helpful to explain. I know those of you who are international have worked with all of these all the time, day in and day out, but I think for those in here who don't know, I think that's extremely helpful. And kind of going back to some of our partners here, which one are any of these? I'm pretty sure the most of you have, of course, the majority of your incoming students are usually on an app. I don't see you having a lot of J's. Are any of you having any J's coming in this fall? So I see a lot of heads.
We typically do have a few. I don't know because I don't really handle those applications. I'm not exactly sure if we have students that are planning to come on a J this fall. I think it's unlikely. We had some in the spring because we're on a quarter system at DePaul. So we have 3 quarters during the regular academic year. So at the time when everything shut down in Chicago for the pandemic, we were at a natural break in our academic year, just moving into spring break, which at the end of spring break, we start our final term. So that whole term ended up being remote and online. And we had some J students who were planning on coming that ended up either deferring or withdrawing or studying from their home countries for that exchange term. So they didn't come basically on the J visa at that time. I don't know about fall.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that's similar for you all at University of Kentucky as well.
Yeah. So a lot of this international students who arrive on a J visa are through some institutional partnerships that we have with universities overseas. And so they have, different program coordinators who manage those partnerships. And from what I've seen, it looks like they have all deferred to the spring semester at this point.
Okay. Thank you. And I think that's helpful as well too. And I want to say most of the people in our audience also don't really have a lot of J's coming in. Oh my goodness, that was my buzzer. So please ignore that. So with that said, I do have another question for you all. So I guess, Alicia, what are some ways institutions can communicate with students around this topic?
So I think that the ways to communicate may vary based on your institution and what your student body looks like. In my opinion, it's the quantity of the communication and the quality of the communication. At least, when in terms of my clients, I try my best to over communicate with them, like what's happening with their case, what's this new law, just sending out like a barrage of information. And it serves 2 purposes. One, it helps keep them informed, feel empowered that they have control over their case, they know what's happening, but also helps from, minimizing the calls and the emails and the texts and the showing up at the office, which happen anyways. But at least, if I am just constantly sending out updates and information through whatever their preferred means of communication is, it can help ensure that they get the message, that they feel comfortable and confident and have their questions answered before they ask them.
And for the universities present, how are you all, based on some of the things Alicia has been saying, I'm assuming many of you all are doing things similarly. What ways are you being innovative in how you communicate with students during this time?
Yeah, I would, for University of Kentucky, I would first echo what Alicia is saying, is that communication is key. So we've been using all of the channels, of course, email blasts, but also Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok, anywhere that we have a social media presence where we are using to to get the word out about any changes that there might be, or how students get in touch with us to talk to us about that. We are also kind of doing it on a more personal level. So on WeChat or WhatsApp, depending on what means of communication students use, letting them know that it's not just the university as an entity, but it's Rachel, it's Landon, you know, it's our team. You can reach out to us individually, and we are either going to answer your question, or we are going to be that clearinghouse who's going to direct you to exactly where or who you need to talk to. So I think like letting them know that there's a person, not just an office, has been really important for us, that they feel that we personally are there for them. If Landon has anything to add.
It's a great summary.
And Kelsey?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, we're always in touch with our students in one way or another. So like, I think in terms of official communication and like trying to summarize and keep on top of things that are happening, we're sending out emails to the students, but we're also texting our students from like individual counselor numbers in our CRM. So it's coming from like my number for texting students. So that's been like a more personalized way that we've been in touch with them. But also a big part of this is like helping them to facilitate conversations with their immigration advisors in our ISS team, which is a separate team within our division for us at DePaul. So just facilitating conversations where we can't have them ourselves in terms of student-specific situations as how it pertains to their immigration.
And have all of you already done orientation or have orientation coming up for your international students? And how has that been going? And how are you able to deliver this information?
Yeah, so at the University of Kentucky, it's coming up. We do plan on doing a modified in-person orientation, but then we plan on doing a virtual one as well, just to accommodate all the different students and their situations. Because of course, the ones that are starting through the Global Wildcats program online, we do want to include them in this process, right? In the orientation process, make them feel like they are starting their freshman year at the University of Kentucky, even if it's not in person. So yes, we do have, you know, a modified in-person one with all the safety protocols in place, of course, and then a virtual one as well.
To my knowledge, all of our orientation materials were shifted online. We had already had like a pre-departure orientation online that students had to complete before they arrived. But I'm pretty sure that our ISS team has kept everything in an online format. Basically because, and I didn't mention this in our very first question when we were talking about like our plans for the fall, but as I'm sure everyone is aware, things could change very quickly in terms of how we're allowed to conduct our classes this term, especially in a place like Chicago, where we are an urban campus. We're in the city itself in 2 different neighborhoods. So there's not really a lot of space in some cases for social distancing. The building where I typically work, for example, you have to go everywhere in elevators. So obviously that adds a huge complication to trying to keep people away from each other. So, you know, I think that when we kind of were thinking about planning for the term, while we do want to have some courses in person, we've really prioritized courses that have to be in person or like really lend themselves to that face-to-face interaction, like science labs, music instruction, things like that. I'm sure that's very similar at a lot of campuses, but yeah, as to my knowledge, we don't have any orientation planned in person. I'm pretty sure that it's all going to be online, whether it's interactive or asynchronous.
Thank you. And I have another question for you, Alicia, kind of related to that. And I think this might be extremely helpful for all of our partners who are here today. Are there any exemption clauses students and higher ed professionals should be aware of if we are faced with similar rulings again? Because there's actually a little rumor that this might come again, and maybe you could help us clarify if the rumor is true, and if it were to happen again, what steps can universities take?
Yeah, it's complicated and we don't know. I mean, I am unfortunately, I'm not privy to advanced communications from DHS or from the White House for that matter. But so we don't know. I mean, hopefully the way that they've left it still begs for some clarification in terms of what percentage of courses would need to be in person. I'm hoping that they're leaving it to sort of in the best interpretation of the university, so it's really de minimis. But so in terms of exemptions, it's pretty limited. In terms of an F1 non-immigrant visa, the requirement is that the individual is, in order to maintain status, is the general rule is the student has to have a full credit course load here in the US. Now, if the student has not yet traveled to the US, then it may be possible to get a new I-20, defer their start date to the next semester or whenever it makes most sense. But if the student is already here, options are really, really limited. It may be possible to take a semester off, but the student would have to leave the country. If the student was able to do that in a way that only resulted in being like 5 months or so out of the country, they may be able to return on the same I-20, but departures that are longer than that, and even at that point, are going to get iffy. CBP has a lot of discretion, Customs and Border Protection, which is ICE at the border and at airports and international seaports. Have a lot of discretion, and so things are always tricky. I always tell my clients that there's no guarantees. The visa that you're granted doesn't guarantee that you're getting in the US for any period of time. It almost guarantees you the ability to present yourself for admission. It gives you the ability to step up to the desk to talk to CBP, and then they call the shots, they make the decision. The other option could be to try for a medically reduced caseload if there was an argument for that. Medically reduced caseload can provide for a partial or in some cases a full reduction in credits for a period of time if the individual is suffering certainly from a medical condition, but also from a mental health condition that could, things like depression and anxiety, which I think many of us feel on a regular basis because of what's going on, and a wide range of other related conditions. If they get a recommendation from a licensed mental health or medical practitioner, that may allow the individual to temporarily reduce the credit course load and not be held to that requirement of the full credit course load. And that's about it. I mean, there may be some individuals who are here on an F1 who may be able to change status to something else, but the options are pretty limited, and they're really going to be fact specific. So if there's a student who is not fitting into any of these options and is looking to see what else might be possible, they should definitely be sitting down with an experienced attorney or a DOJ accredited legal organization that is licensed to do immigration practice to get some fact-specific advice.
And Alicia, what advice, let's say I'm an international student, I'm returning, I'm somewhat excited because there's a global pandemic, so I'm also nervous, but I'm actually excited to be back in the US, somewhere close to campus or on campus, whatever it may be, and something similar to the way things were before COVID hit. But now I get stuck at the airport because of something with Custom and Border Patrol. What advice would you give that student in what to do that would be helpful for them to not make their situation worse?
Yeah. I mean, once it's at that point, there isn't a whole lot. My advice would be coming before that, right? Like once you're with CBP, you're at their mercy. You can try to ask for an attorney, but it's unlikely that you're going to be able to get an attorney in the room. As would normally be advised for folks coming in on any non-immigrant visa, even though it's already been approved, they should be carrying evidence of their eligibility. So absolutely the I-20, but then anything else they have that shows that they are going to be pursuing a full credit course load, that it's not 100% online, and evidence of the resources that are available to them, things like that, just to be extra cautious. If you get in that position where CBP is questioning your non-immigrant intent, questioning criminal background, right? Those would be the reasons why CBP would stop you at the airport. My advice is to tell the truth, and to, absolutely try to assert your rights in terms of getting an attorney. But at that point, you're sort of at their whim. And so it's just honestly answering questions, providing the evidence that you hopefully have ready, and then seeing what goes from there.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that? Because
Yes.
there's a lot of stories like flying around right now amongst professionals on our side, like from students coming into the country, which is, I'm sure, where this stems from. So what would you say to a student before they leave to try and prevent something like this from happening, if there is any way that they could work themselves out of this situation? So as many of us know, typically, like when students are coming in, they need to have a physical version of their I-20 that has been signed, not in black ink, advisably, by an official at the school. So usually we will ship these to students in their home country so that they can have that with them when they're coming back. Amidst the pandemic, because many of us are not physically in our offices, it's hard to get couriers. For a while, they couldn't even go in certain countries to deliver these packages to students. SCBP amended the guidance to say that we can send scanned versions of the signed I-20s to students that they can print off and bring with them. It's not official because it's not the original like signed document, but it was kind of been allowed as a stopgap during a global pandemic. And students have found, at least one that I know of that has come in Chicago recently, was told that he wasn't allowed to come in with the printed version. This was a returning student who had already been studying here, was coming back to the US after summer break. Do you have anything that you could advise students before they leave to do? Because this is a CBP officer that's not following the guidance that SCBP has set forth, that we're all trying to follow. So what do they do? I know CBP agents have this level of autonomy at the border to make these discretionary decisions. What would you say to a student like that before they come?
If this is specific to the I-20 and it being a scan or a copy versus original wet ink signature, then what I would say is, if they can't get the wet ink signature document, then that they carry along with it printed guidance, and that during this time the scanned copy is sufficient, and carry that with them. Whether that's printed out or whatever it is, but so that they can present that guidance, which comes from CBP's boss, because SCBP is part of DHS, to point them in the direction of following the law.
Okay, that would have been my advice too, but yeah, I was like, if you can think of anything better, I just would tell them, like, print this off of the website and take it with you.
That's really all. I mean, you could also, that's really it. I mean, you could try to get, print out an email or correspondence from the school itself as well, confirming the same. We're scanning you this over because currently, as DHL is not delivering. You should present, kind of outline it for the student, but what you're really doing is outlining it for the CBP officer who's going to be reading it.
Right. And with that said, I have one question for you all, the panelists, and then we're going to move into the questions that came in through the Q&A. So the question that I have for you all, based on all of this that is happening, how has this affected your incoming and prospective students? What is some of the feedback that you're hearing from them? What is their perspective now of studying in the US that you're gathering?
Well, I can say, one blatant thing that we've seen, whether it's through our own experience or the endless amount of surveys that different organizations have produced over the last few weeks and couple of months is that students overwhelmingly want to study in person, right? Like if they have to start online, you know, there's some that are willing to do so, but they want to study in person, right? And so we have seen quite a few students just defer their admitted status completely to the spring semester, and that's their plan. They would prefer to just wait it out and start in person from the very beginning if they can do that. And then we've seen other students that have, you know, opted for that online, that 100% online start option, even though they would like to study in person, just because of the visa difficulties or even some unforeseen, you know, financial circumstances that make the online start an attractive way to start and knock out, you know, 15 plus credit hours and then arrive and continue in person for the spring semester. So I mean, you know, Rachel can comment on this as well, but my personal interaction with students, I think it's just being seen as more of a temporary barrier that we all have to adjust to. As far when we talk to high school counselors, you know, younger students that are in their junior, going into their senior year, or sophomores, or even freshmen, you know, they still have their goals. They're thinking long term, and I think business is, you know, moving forward as usual in that regard. And it's really these students that are entering right now that are being the most affected. And so we're all just trying to accommodate them as much as possible.
Yeah, I would agree. The optimism of youth, that they do see this as a temporary barrier rather than something that could be a permanent setback. And, you know, the only thing I would really add to what Landon has said is they crave communication right now. Even in when the new guidance first went out and we didn't know what to tell them concretely, just the idea that they can reach out, we are going to respond. Even if our response is, we are waiting for guidance, we are going to get back to you soon. They do crave that contact with us and also with current international students. So I would say that has become, like, these contact points have become more important than before, you know. But yeah, there's a lot of optimism for students who see this as a temporary setback. They don't see this as a barrier, or that it means that their goal of studying in the US has disappeared in any way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would echo all of that sentiment. I don't really have anything else to add.
Well, you know what? This leads me to a question from the audience. And I think this might be geared more towards Alicia, but I think the rest of you would be able to chime in. So this person had said, we have just announced that we are going online for the fall semester. We have students who already have visa appointments. Should they cancel their current visa appointment or keep the appointment and just send their I-20 with the new program date?
So assuming that what you mean is that it's going to be 100% online, there's going to be no opportunity for an in-person component, then the students have to make a decision that's best given their personal circumstances. They certainly could go to the visa appointment and seek a deferment to, you know, the spring semester, or you know, whatever makes sense. Or you know, cancel the appointment and reschedule at a later date. You know, embassies abroad are really non-uniform in many ways, but especially right now with what appointments are available and who they're seeing. So I would be sort of surprised if there are folks who have a currently scheduled F1 visa interview scheduled, you know, prior to the semester starting, because it's, you know, most embassies have been really slow to move forward on those interviews. So it really just depends on their personal circumstances, what the process took for them to get to that interview scheduled, how the embassy is currently operating. Yeah.
Thank you. I had another one, unless you all have something to add to that, but Alicia, that's a really good answer. Thank you. Here's another one as well. which I also think is probably more geared towards Alicia as well too, but I think the rest of you can chime in. Some students are non-credit students such as ESL students. These students cannot take online classes for their non-credit courses. Has the online hybrid course requirement changed for ESL students?
I'm not aware that it has, but I don't know that for certain right now. I mean, I could certainly confirm and then follow up. I don't know if any of the administrators know offhand.
No, we actually, we have a team that runs our ESL center at the University of Kentucky, and they've been working with the legal office to accommodate all those students in their situations. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard what the last word was from our English Language Academy at DePaul. I know that going into planning for the fall, it was never really considered that they would be fully online because the assumption was that they would have to have the in-person instruction. When we went as an emergency online, they were able to shift to an online modality, but I don't know for sure.
Here's another question, which this is again for all of you. This actually might be more geared towards our universities that are here. For incoming students, are you meeting to greet them and confirm your arrival for SEVIS registration? So I guess that I'm assuming that's referring to the check-in.
Yeah.
Require check-in.
So again, this is not my department because it's more our International Student Services team who runs that. But I know that the plan campus-wide, including with our ISS team, is to have that office operating in person to service students who are on campus. I assume that we will be planning to conduct those check-ins in person. How many students will be arriving is the bigger question. I don't know how many they will need to perform a check-in for. I mean, it will probably be more for students who are transferring that are already in the US, because I kind of alluding to what Alicia said, I don't know how many students are going to get a visa in time to arrive before the start of the fall quarter. But yeah, we are going to be moving once the academic year starts, and probably the week prior to the start of classes, we'll start having probably about a third of staff back on campus for offices that are student facing. So very minimal staffing in person, but probably enough to conduct the things that need to happen in person, including the immigration check-in.
Yeah, very similar situation at the University of Kentucky. ISSS has set up a tent outside. We're fortunate enough to have this big, spacious courtyard area. So we set up a tent and have all the social distancing protocols in place, and of course, plenty of masks and hand sanitizer. So there is that option. I know that they have created some virtual options as well to accommodate students. That might be the best option for them for whatever reason, even if they are arriving in person to campus. But yeah, again, it's not our department, so it's there's a lot more details that go into the planning, but they do have various options to meet the students and do the SEVIS check-ins.
And kind of to go off of that, here's another question. If the school goes online for the first half of the semester, can we still advise students to join in the fall semester? And I guess maybe, Alicia, this is more directed at you, but also if the rest of you can talk about the situation as well too, because I'm assuming you have students who are probably going to be in this kind of interesting situation where they might be online only for the first half of the semester until they actually arrive.
So is it, is it supposed to be joined for the spring semester? Is that what we think that?
No, I think it's joining in the middle of fall. Like if
Oh,
the
join
school is starting doing only online for the first half of the semester, and
for
then
the first half of the fall
Yeah.
semester. I don't know if there are universities who are trying to make arrangements for that to work. I don't really know how that could work with CVIS requirements, unless there's some really creative planning that happens. So I don't think that there's a way for students to not start at the beginning of the semester, but jump in halfway through if at some point the learning transitions to something more hybrid.
Yeah, to kind of follow up from the administrative side at the universities, like within CVIS, you have to set the dates of the academic term for the university at large. So in terms of students entering the country on an F1 visa, they have to come in not before a certain number of days ahead of the start of that date, the start of the semester, and not a certain number of days after the start of that term will they be allowed to enter the country for the first time to study that term. So I think because of the way that CVIS is set up and the way that it's regulated in terms of like the dates that you have to be beholden to as an institution and as the student sponsored by the institution, I don't think that model would work. And I don't know that there's any exceptions that have been made for the pandemic in terms of that. I haven't heard of anything.
Yeah, I would have nothing to add because what Kelsey said there covers that.
Okay. Thank you. And then lastly, actually we have a few more questions. So I have not heard this, but maybe you all have heard this. So again, this is to all of you. Is there a requirement for international students to have the COVID test in the US after they arrive, or can they do the test in their native country before departure? I don't think there's a universal answer to this, but Alicia, maybe you can help us out, or if you all have heard anything else.
So the biggest obstacle are the travel restrictions, right? Passenger, individuals, students from many countries are prohibited from entering the US unless they are a specific relative of a US citizen or another exception applies. So that's the kind of nationwide obstacle. And then in terms of additional restrictions, in terms of quarantine or a COVID test, it's going to be state specific. For example, states like Connecticut require a 14-day quarantine. Other states may require something similar, or there may be some that require a negative COVID test. I'm not aware of any at the moment, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. So yeah, it's going to be state specific, but also there's this overarching prohibition for individuals traveling from countries who are in either of the two travel bans. So that's individuals who are many individuals in Europe and the individuals who are parties to the Schengen Treaty, and then China and Brazil, and I think Italy is still. Oh no, not Italy. I'm sorry, Iran.
Okay. And then should they? I haven't heard anything as well as people taking it before. In their native country. I don't know, have any of you heard that? And to my understanding, the only thing I've heard has been mainly airline specific based on the requirements the airline has, but I haven't heard anything beyond that. What else have you all heard?
Only airline specific.
Yeah, we haven't heard anything beyond that. What Alicia mentioned, and then what we're doing at University of Kentucky is that we have the capacity to test all 30,000 students because we're lucky to have healthcare facilities on campus. So all students are encouraged to take a COVID test within 24 hours of their arriving on campus for all of our in-campus students. So we have that available to them. And I would certainly say that after international travel, we would rather, instead of having a COVID test and bring the results with you, because we're offering them on campus and for free, we would encourage our students to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I think just echoing what everybody said, I think it's very specific to that student's individual situation. There might be regulations that the university has. There might be requirements that a city has. Certainly Chicago has had stricter requirements at different times than the rest of the state of Illinois. So if you're talking to your students, I would encourage them to not accept what their friend is saying, not accept what their dad's friend has said when he traveled to the US before the pandemic. Like, you need to tell them to look at specific, usually like CDC websites, for cities, for states, for individual communities where the schools are located, because it's going to be different for everybody. And then most universities have like some kind of place for students, or options for students if they're having them live on campus in residential facilities, guidelines on how they have to quarantine if they have to quarantine. So like, in Chicago, there are certain states and everywhere outside the US that if you're coming into Chicago right now, you have to quarantine for 14 days. And that's like 24 different states in the US in addition to other countries. So all of our students coming in from those places will have to quarantine for 14 days. And we have, if they're moving into residence halls, they'll have the option to do that in the residence hall by moving in early if they're taking classes in person. We actually have like 4 different options that we emailed students about. These are the different things that you could do to meet the requirement, but we don't have any requirements that students take a COVID test. It's more like quarantine requirements, but they're definitely encouraged to do so because there are so many places you can do them in the city. So.
And here is this is actually my last question. And then of course, if there are any other questions that come in, that's great. And we're actually getting close to the end of our time. But so with the social distancing restrictions, how do you plan on holding events for international students and other kind of student prep programming? What suggestions do you have? I have a few of my own that I'd love to give as someone who was in ISSS. You know, that's how I know Kelsey, because we used to work a few blocks from each other. So, but I have some, but I want to know, what do you all suggest to kind of keep your international students engaged, at least virtually, during this time?
I think that there's 2 parts to this for us. So we do have the online program for our international students who could not make it to the US. And we do have components built into the Global Wildcats program that are like social components and Introduction to University of Kentucky and a virtual tour of Lexington. So there is definitely an attempt to do community building and to have the students interact with each other and not just their instructor from their classes as part of these online programs, because I think that's really going to be key in making them, you know, really feel like they're getting the university experience as they're in their home country to begin classes.
Are there certain things certain tools that you're using to have some of these, like what certain things are you all planning to do, like any kind of games or anything like that are online?
Well, I know there's a lot of like virtual tours and virtual visits, like to campus and places around campus, but also to Lexington and in the area surrounding, like so they kind of start to see where they'll hopefully be in person in the spring. So there's kind of on the one hand, I know that there's the attempt to really make them aware of what their surroundings will be and make them feel like they're a community in that way. And Landon, I don't know if there are any other specific initiatives that you're aware of that they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, even for a group of international ambassadors that our team manages, we've discussed using, you know, the breakout room feature on Zoom and just ways to create, you know, smaller, more intimate environments where students can converse amongst themselves and they're not in these large group settings all the time, even if it is virtual. And then, you know, since we are going to have students on campus, I know that there's some areas that are going to try and do some in-person things, but obviously every university has their own, you know, safety protocols with social distancing and how those things can be carried out. And I think a lot of that, of course, is going to depend on where the university is located. Is it located in a city, a more rural area, which state, what are the state guidelines? and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think it really has to be specific to the type of university and where it's located and what the university protocol is as a whole. But from a technology standpoint, I would encourage anyone to just investigate all the different platforms that are available and choose the most interactive options possible.
Yeah, like over the last quarter of the past academic year, our international services office did change a lot of their social programming for international students to an online format, utilizing, Landon, you mentioned the breakout room function in Zoom. That was a big part of it. We usually would do something called our global coffee hour, where it's usually like topic based, and in person we would have like a big room where we have snacks and things, and then there's different round tables and there's different discussion leaders at each table, and they have a topic, and then they switch tables every few minutes and go to different areas. And it's a good way to it's like a social mixer basically. So that happened, but in a virtual format, for one example. And then, yeah, I would echo to what you said about researching all of these different platforms and softwares. Some of them are free, some of them you have to pay a subscription for. But it's been amazing how many things have come out that you can do to keep that kind of like social interaction and team building. I've actually been looking into this a lot lately because I'm trying to plan our team's retreat, which is going to be very different than it usually would be. So yeah, there's a ton of stuff. There's, I'm sure people have heard of the House Party app where you can like have parties online. I know that a lot of our social organizations on campus have done like online DJs and dance parties. And I did with family that I have in different parts of the world, we did a murder mystery party on Zoom one day. So like there's tons of different ways that you can kind of shift those activities to an online format. And I think that's what a lot of our programming at DePaul will end up being like. I think everyone is kind of holding their breath to see if we will have in-person instruction this fall. We're supposed to start classes September 9th. And like I said, at the end of the day, the university can plan all at once. We're in the city of Chicago. If the mayor says that we can't have gatherings or we can't have in-person classes, then we can't. So it might end up being the case that we move to a totally online format too. So I think a lot of what we're doing is planning for both eventualities. And so a lot of it, I think, is going to end up being virtual still in terms of the social programming. But yeah, like you said too, Landon, that every university is in a totally different place under different guidelines, different type of situation with our format and our space. And you have to kind of do what's going to be best for your campus and your students.
I have a few ideas as well too. I was in ISSS pre-COVID, but there were some things that I always had in my head for virtual activities, which I always think people should try out. One thing that is amazing to do, if you have used Kahoot at any time in your life, that is really great. I think for your ambassadors that you have to kind of keep them abreast in certain things happening on campus, you can always do like a 5-question Kahoot on certain things to kind of quiz them, give a cute little prize at the end or something like that. That could be either a gift card to Amazon or Uber Eats or something like that. Also, one thing for international, we love food. Like anyone in international, we love to eat, which is why we do what we do, because then we can eat from different parts of the world,
Obviously.
And yeah, different kinds
100%.
of coffee, all of that. So this is a great opportunity for your students who love cooking to they can let us into their homes and do a cooking demonstration on Zoom. And that's a good idea too. Something that's only about a half hour or so, something that's quick and easy and accessible, because one thing that everyone has to do is, no matter what part of the country you're in, they have to go to the grocery store because they need food. So that's one thing you could do, and tie that into really kind of staying at home, but what ways you can cook at home. Another idea as well too, what we use actually for our socials here at Unibuddy is Scribble, and I will probably type that out somewhere, but it's pretty much Pictionary, but online. So, which is pretty fun. It gets a little crazy, but it is fun nonetheless. And it's something that I think you can encourage either for your team building with your ambassadors or for any kind of international event too. And it's something that you all could do. And those are some of my ideas. But I think there are so many different ideas that you all can share and give out. And with that said, we're running close to the end of our time. If there are any more questions, you can go ahead and put them in. But for the most part, we, I think, are a little bit done or close to done. Are there any parting words any of you all have? No?
Keep the
Other
dream
than-
alive.
Yeah, keep the dream alive and keep the faith. So yes, I think we're gonna get through this all together. If we're definitely gonna have more fireside chats. Please, 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 we want your feedback. We want to know how well this went for all of you, and what ways you could see improvement, and also if you have any other topics you would like to see in the future. So thank you all so much. Special thanks to all of you lovely panelists. You all look amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your brains with us, and for keeping us abreast on what's going on. And I will see you all virtually again very soon. Thank you all so much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank